Good evening, everybody. Here we are for yet another one of our mental health clinics. Can't even remember which one it is now. It's seventh or eighth one. And it's great that we've got this platform to really be able to engage everyone and ensure that you have a way to be able to ask the questions and get the support you really need in these challenging and uncertain times. If you don't already know, my name is Neil Shah. I'm the Chief De-Stressing Officer at the Stress Management Society and co-founder of the Recovery Campaign, which has really been put together to ensure that we have a more proportionate and balanced response to deal with all of the challenges we're facing, not just put all our eggs in one basket. And I'm joined today, once again, by the lovely Juliet. Do you want to introduce yourself, Juliet?
Hi, Neil. I'm Juliet Hollingsworth. I'm a hypnotherapist, and I'm enjoying doing these mental health clinics and helping people that have really been struggling over the past year, really. I mean, it's a year, isn't it, of struggles. It's been nice to be able to help people who might not have had access to help otherwise, and hoping we can go forward with less people needing support. But this is a long-term thing. People are going to need support for a long time now. So
absolutely. And we're slap bang in the middle of Stress Awareness Month. This is an important opportunity to look at how stress and mental health has impacted us, particularly given we're now in this transitionary phase where apparently there is light at the end of the tunnel. We've had some of our freedoms and liberties restored. I was driving back from the office on Monday afternoon on the way to another meeting, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, all the pubs I drove past on the way home were heaving, beer gardens full, people looking pretty drunk at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Social media awash with pictures of people getting their hair done or going to the gym or getting their nails done. People shopping again in non-essential retail. So I think it's very easy for us to forget the impact that the last year has had because we are so distracted by the doing and bury those feelings that we've harbored for some time. But also, I think this Stress Awareness Month for me is the most important one ever, because there's people with this romantic notion that life will go back to normal, this illusion of normal, the world that used to exist before this happened. The reality is, because of the deep impact this has had to our way of lives and to our mental and emotional health and well-being, we may never go back to the way things were, or it could take a very, very long time. So I think it's really important that we take the time today to reflect on that and to consider what do we need to do to increase our resilience, to ensure that we are all equipped with the tools, skills, confidence, and the ability to be able to navigate these times. So I think that's a good place for us to start. So Julie, we always start by kind of, doing a week in review. So, what's been happening over the last week? It feels like, people have got a bit more of a spring in their step at the moment because we've had some of our freedoms restored. What's been your observations?
Yeah, I think so. And the good weather, we had that kind of blip where we had the snow. For the past couple of days, the weather's been good. It feels nicer. If you have children, people have been on Easter holidays, which is kind of weird when children haven't been in school for so long. But I know the schools that were asking the children to log on to the screens every day. And I think people are enjoying just having a break from that. So, yeah, lots going on. My experience with therapy and helping people is there seems to be a lot of people struggling with sleep, anxiety presenting in that way. I had a few talks about kind of the immune system, immunity and nutrition. That's been really interesting. Also, something I think to keep in mind, you said that we're all back to normal and it's easy to forget and we are adaptable. But actually, it's also easy to forget that sometimes long-term stress, turns into anxiety, and this anxiety comes out in ways we might not even realize. And so it's really important to continue the self-care and make sure that you recognize when you're maybe not quite yourself. And is that anxiety, is that stress? Is that just stuff coming out from what's been there, what's been happening over the past year? There's so many different things that are personal and individual to everyone. You know, the fear of people dying, that fear that's really been instilled in everyone through the media, the confusion with the big U-turns, one minute you can do this, then you can't do that. And also something else that's come up is maybe it's a boundary thing where people have not necessarily enjoyed being locked away for the past year, but they've very much done things on their own terms because there's been no other option. And now suddenly we go back into this normal world, and you know, people might be booking loads of things in because they feel they have to. Almost that guilt coming out of, if I'm not doing something all of the time, then I'm not good enough, I'm not being productive enough. And not wanting to let people down, and just doing things that other people want without considering yourself. And so boundaries a bit, and a bit taking time to reflect on yourself, and thinking about, you know, am I doing this because I really want to, because it's going to bring me joy, because I'm going to feel good, get something for it, or am I doing it because I feel an expectation to do it, or because someone else wants me to do it and I'm scared of saying no?
I think that's important. That, you know, we do live in the Instagram world where often we're doing things so we can show the rest of the world, look how wonderful I am and look what I'm doing. The amount of people that I've seen that put it on Facebook, oh yes, I've got my hair done, or I'm in the gym, or you know, people posting, I've had my vaccine. It's like, okay, great, but you know, do you see people posting on Facebook when they've had a paracetamol, or when you know, they've had their tetanus jab because they got bitten by a dog? It's like, you wouldn't do that. But how have we got to the point where we feel compelled to share every aspect of our life, even the most inane, with the rest of the world, just to show people? You know, there are terms which were completely alien to me, which I've learned about over the last couple of months, like gaslighting, and what was the other one? Virtue signaling. I didn't even know what that meant until a few months ago. But it's really interesting, the world we find ourselves in. But I think that has desensitized us to what is actually happening. The example I would offer, Julia, if I walked up to you with a rusty nail and I stabbed you in the leg with it, you'd slap me. It's like, Neil, what the hell did you do that for? Why did you just stab me in the leg with a rusty nail? It's not very nice. I thought we were friends. Why would you do that? But the thing is, that your natural reaction would be to pull it out, right? But if you didn't, let's say you just left it there, after a while, your body would heal around the rusty nail, if it didn't become infected, that is. And eventually you'd forget that it was there. You just learn to live with it. That would become your new normal, right? You're walking around with a limp and, like, you know, uncomfortable feeling your leg. There's certain things you couldn't do, but you just accept that that's just the way it is, right? You'd never consider the fact that that bloody nail shouldn't be there in the first place, right?
Yeah.
That sadly is the reality of the situation for a lot of people, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Then 20 years down the line, you go to see a wonderful healer, therapist, that looks at you and says to you, Juliet, you've got a rusty nail in your leg. And you're like, what? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We need to remove that. And as they try to remove it, it's really painful and really uncomfortable to remove it, even though every day it's impacting your life. There is a process you need to go through which will create short-term pain, but long-term, you'll be free, right?
Yeah.
That is what is happening collectively as a population. We've had a rusty nail shoved in our leg. And sadly, a hell of a lot of people have just got accustomed to it. And now we're talking about removing that rusty nail. Like, whoa, what are you doing?
Yeah, that reminds me, I think it's probably a different kind of metaphor, but there's a children's book, A Squash and a Squeeze. Do you know it? And it's about an old woman, and she lives in a small house, and she's moaning that her house is too small. So she goes to speak to someone about it, and the person says, she's a farmer, bring in your chicken. And so she brings in her chicken, and this, you know, she says, my house is still too small. So the woman says, well, bring in your goat. So she brings in her goat. She says, my house is still too small. Bring in your cow. You know, goes through all the animals so that the house is crammed full of all these animals. And then she goes to the woman and says, you know, there's even less space. Why are you telling me to do this? And the woman said, I can't remember it properly, but it's basically, now let everyone out. And the woman's like, my house feels huge. And we're kind of maybe in this similar situation where we've been so restricted, and now we've given a little bit, and we feel like we've got more freedom than we've ever had in our lives. But actually, we haven't quite, and so we've got to be very careful to not kind of go out there jumping, for joy. Well, no, we should be positive, but not think that everything's just going to clear away because suddenly we've reverted straight back, because it hasn't reverted back to how it was, and it is different. And the stress and the anxiety and the fear, all of those things may still be there, and there are still stuff in the media, and it's terrifying in different ways for different people.
And I think this nicely leads us on to some of the questions we've had in this week. I'm going to group a couple of the questions because there was a lot in a very similar vein. And I draw on your experience and expertise as a therapist. I think there was a lot of questions around people being scared and fearful about going back to work in particular, where people have been told by their employer, right, you're going to be going back to work on X day. People are really scared about that and really fearful. The returning to that normal sense of engagement and interactivity. There's fears and concerns around that. Now, essentially, there's a lot of people that have been very seriously templated by the fear that has been disseminated over the last 12 months. For me, again, this is my opinion, but what I've seen, it very much feels like psychological warfare conducted by the people in charge against the population to get them to comply, which is dangerous. But obviously there will be a hangover to that. They don't just drop that programming the moment that you're told everything's okay. If you had someone that has come to see you in a professional capacity that had a trauma at some point in their life, and they are concerned about how to really make peace with that and come to terms with that experience so they can kind of move on with their life, what would you suggest to them? Because I think this is, there's at least 7 or 8 questions of people that are in some way, shape or form concerned or fearful about going back to the lives as they used to live. There was one in particular that kind of used the analogy of if you had been in an abusive relationship, how would you be able to go back to that? So if you were in an abusive relationship, how would you go back to another relationship based on the trauma you had? Yeah, so again, how do we support people in sort of coming to terms with fear and sort of concerns that have been templated by a traumatic experience to be able to reintegrate to their normal lives so they can have happy, fulfilling lives?
Yeah, okay. I think the first thing we should make clear, because some people might be sat there thinking, where's the trauma? I've not been worried. We know, I mean, you and I know because we've read the documents. Other people may not know, and other people will have read the documents and will know that it was a government strategy to use fear to encourage compliance. That doesn't mean that our personal beliefs are whatever they are. It doesn't mean that we disbelieve COVID or we disbelieve the statistics that they've put out or anything like that. It's just a simple truth that was the government strategy to use fear. Therefore, their psychologists, their behaviour specialists will have, in whatever way they know to do, instilled fear in us, the population, to make sure we comply. Fear is traumatic. So all of us that have been watching the news, listening to the radio, reading the newspapers, reading anything that's put out there by the government, and actually mainstream media a lot of the time, has been fear-inducing. Some people will take that fear on really quite strongly and suffer quite a lot as a result of that. Other people maybe not so much. And I think it's really important to make it clear that I feel like some people will respond with, but we should be scared, thousands of people were dying. And yeah, maybe some people should have been cautious, but it's just that things will have been worded and phrased in a way to make us more fearful than actually we maybe need it to be, because if we're more fearful, we will comply. and they need everyone to comply. And there's some of us that may have complied, even if, you know, if the government had just said we need you to stay at home and not told us anything that was happening. There's a percentage of the population that would have complied and didn't need the fear. And then there's a percentage of the population that wouldn't and needed the fear. But they've had to put, it's one of those cover-all things, isn't it? A bit like a, you know, a childhood vaccination program. Give it to everybody because that's better than kind of taking out the people that need these things. And so we've all been given fear. Some people have chosen to switch off from it and will be less affected, but other people have watched this and listened to it and read about it day in, day out, and our imaginations take it on, our brain takes it on, and it can cause trauma. Even if we've not been affected.
That fear program?
So switch off from it for a start. Certainly switch off from it. Start, you know, doing things. I'm just thinking back to one person I spoke with who was so terrified of going into a situation that she moved house, and before she moved house she would have gone walking down the high street of where she lived with no problem at all, and then she moved out into the countryside and watched the TV a lot, listened to the radio a lot, read the newspaper a lot, and became so scared of going anywhere that wasn't the countryside. And I kind of put it to her, but if you lived in the old place, doesn't matter if this is going on, would you have still felt that fear? And she kind of recognized that, you know, the news and everything was doing one thing, but it was that it had become abnormal for her to go out into a busy place. So when it's become abnormal for us to be around people because we've just been locked away, take it slowly. You know, it's really important to take it slowly, but start going back into that world a little bit and realizing that it's not quite as scary as the newspapers have said, the TV has said. You mentioned kind of briefly before about the fear of going back to work and going back to normality, and I think that, you know, we've got the trauma thing, but also a change thing. So many of us don't like change, and you know, initially the lockdown was challenging because that was a big change, and we've spent a year getting used to that, and now that feels a bit more comfortable, and we're going to have another big change. And I think working out some kind of plan for the change, so writing, and this can be done for the trauma as well, but just a little plan about how to manage certain situations, working it out rather than becoming overwhelmed with the anxiety. You know, we've spoken before about how anxious thinking is kind of worrying about the future, worrying about the past, but very little being in the present. So just being in the present, realizing that everything's okay right now, but creating plans for the change. With regards to the trauma, I mean, it's still ongoing. It's still in the news. It's still on the radio. It's still in the newspaper. I mean, you can see a therapist. You can go back out there. You can take things slowly. It's very, very difficult when that terror, when that fear is still, you know, it's like standing in front of a person with a gun and saying, take away the trauma, because they're not shooting right now, but you don't know when they might. You know, it's very difficult. Switching off from it, definitely.
That's an interesting point, because even like someone standing there with a gun pointing at your face, like the vast majority of the population would immediately go into fear, would be petrified if you're facing that situation. However, there are some people, when faced that situation, will be able to stay cool, calm, and collected, and they know exactly how to deal with it because they're trained to do so. For example, if you're a special forces soldier, you're equipped with the tools, skills, confidence, and the expertise to know how to handle that situation. You would be well equipped to deal with that. Now, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean your life is any more safe than for anyone else, but you're not going into the fear response. Now, at the end of the day, it's not so much what happens, but how you choose to react and respond to that. Now, we have been programmed to react and respond in a particular way, but your response is your own. You do get to choose. You may have chosen due to external input to react in a particular way. But this is really where I come back to the point that we've shared a couple of times over the last few weeks, is about that sense of choice. The word power, which we've introduced before. If you look up the word power in the dictionary applied to a human being, it quite literally means the ability to do or act. So the person with the greatest power has the greatest ability to do or act. If you look up the word victim in the dictionary, it quite literally means someone that is powerless to change their circumstances or has no ability to do or act to influence what they're experiencing. Now, in my humble opinion, at some level, there's always a choice. There's always something you can do. Even if you can't change what's going on outside of you, you can't change what you're doing, when you do it, how you do it, or what you wear whilst you're doing it under current regulations. You do get to choose how you are going to react, how you are going to show up, and whether you're going to fit. You could be like the vast majority of us, gunpoint at your head, you go into absolute kind of freeze state, you're absolutely petrified. Yeah. Or for that, 0.01% of people that are equipped and trained to do that will be able to face that situation and know how to navigate, which maximizes their chances of a positive outcome or a positive end to that scenario. Now, this is where I'm hoping through the work that we do, not just within our clinics, but with recovery in general and all the other work that we're doing as individuals and collectively, is to equip people with the skills and confidence to be able to react in a way where they know how to act and they know what to do to ensure they get a positive outcome. Because a lot of us are ending up with negative outcomes because we don't know how to navigate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really important to know about that anxiety, well, the fight or flight response, that fear response, definitely. It's making me think, you say about how do we remove trauma, and it's so different for every person. There's so many different ways to relieve trauma. For some it's talking therapy, for some they can't even talk about it, and it's something like yoga or some kind of body work. There's so many different ways, but there's a really good book actually I'd like to recommend for anyone undergoing trauma, and you may have read it, The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It's a really, really good book, and well worth a read, and goes through so many different types of therapy, EMDR, EFT, talking therapy, hypnosis. But what works? There isn't one thing that works. It's different for everybody.
And that's an important point. Horses for courses. You've got to find what's right for you. There isn't a one-size-fits-all blanket solution. We're all unique individuals and we're all impacted by things in a different way. Some people have a higher threshold to deal with trauma and anxiety and pain and misery. Some people are better equipped through either nature or nurture. I genuinely would like to believe it's more nurture than nature. I don't think any of us are born more resilient than anyone else.
I agree.
Unless you go into the field of epigenetics, and that seems to suggest that some of us are template, but that's a whole other conversation altogether. But the point I'm making is whatever you've learned, you can unlearn and relearn. And whatever skill set, whatever tools, whatever you learned up until March 2020 may have allowed you to navigate the old world, but the world was reset March 2020. And this is essentially kind of, the before, that was the before, and this is the after. Is your skill set, is your toolkit valid for the world we find ourselves in today? Because I'm pretty sure it's going to need to be updated, and you're going to need some fresh tools, and you're going to need some new approaches.
Yeah, well, some people will have been great in lockdown and now they're panicking about going back to the real world.
Exactly, yeah.
Others would have been great in the real world but really struggled with lockdown and now are fearful that normal isn't going to be right for them. They'll never have their normal again. Nothing, I don't think there's nothing straightforward for anybody. It's complicated in a different way for every person. And I think so many people are feeling really fearful, really scared, but it is important to link that trauma and that fear, because trauma is a big deal, and some people personally go through some really horrific things and have trauma as a result of that, and I think some people maybe might feel a little bit like, how can I say I've been traumatized? I've got PTSD from this, where many people haven't even been personally affected with the virus themselves. But actually, trauma is the result of significant fear. And that's what we've all been through.
Absolutely, and it's actually a really good segue into our next question. This individual starts by saying, I have lost everything of value in my life over the last 9 months. I have lost my job. I was furloughed at first and they terminated my contract. My relationship failed. I had to move out, so I've now moved back with my parents. So as it stands currently, I have no job, I have no relationship, and I don't even have my own home. I can't sleep at night. I wake up frightened and traumatized every single morning. I'm struggling to get through each day. I'm wondering if it's worth going on anymore. Please help.
Really, really, really hard. Really, it's a change thing again, isn't it? It's going from well, it's just going from one situation to another. If you take the personal aspects of it out, this person is just going from one situation to another. But it's a situation, it sounds like they were really, really happy in. And now all of the things that they felt happy about, their relationship, their job, I can't remember the other things you said, but all of those things that they thought were what made them happy are now all gone. It's all gone.
Go further. It's not so much things that make you happy. I feel, and this is something that I can relate to, it feels like this individual defined their life by their job, their home, their relationship.
Yeah.
And when that was taken away, they felt there was nothing to define them anymore. Like, you know, and often we identify with what we have and what we do rather than who we are. Now, it doesn't matter whether you have a relationship, a job, or a home, you're always there. You are there. Now, ultimately, when we realize that the most important thing that we have in our life is the truth of who we are, not the stuff, that's nice, but that doesn't define you. That is not who you are. And I think this is a question a lot of people struggle with. When you ask people, who are you? They will always tell you what they do for a living, or what they have, or their relationship, or their family, or the staff, or, you know, all of these external factors. People really struggle to answer that question, who are you? But when you can clearly identify that, you know, all the external stuff, you know, you'll feel sad and you'll feel upset and losing that. That's natural. But it's not going to get you to the point where it's like there's no point anymore, because there's always a point if you are clear about who you are. And this is a hard one. This is a journey of self-exploration. And actually, you know, I apologize for being blunt to our viewer that wrote this question in. The universe has offered you a real opportunity to take the time to reflect on who you actually are and what is really important. Because all it's done is stripped away some external factors. Now, at the end of the day, relationships, homes, jobs come and go. You are always there. You are there the moment you're born, and you'll be there till the moment you die. You have an opportunity to really invest in the most important relationship you have in your life, the one with yourself. And how can we use this as an opportunity for you to really get to know yourself better, to really identify what's important to you? And that most important question, who you actually are. Because, you know, at the end of the day, when you're going through these kind of traumas, it's very easy to turn your thoughts to what's the permanent solution to this temporary problem. And ultimately, this moment will pass. It will pass. And there'll be a point in the future where you'll have a new job, new relationship, new home, and you'll look back and think, well, actually, you know what? Maybe that it was what happened in that moment that changed the course of my life, that allowed me to enjoy what I'm experiencing today.
That's so very true. And what you said about, you know, we define ourselves. It's that question, is it, when you meet someone and you say, what do you do? And everyone responds with their job. No one says, well, you know, I get up in the morning and I go for a run, and I like, you know, I enjoy having cold showers, and I, you know, no one actually, I don't, by the way, but no one actually says, well, yeah, I do know this. You know, no one says what they enjoy doing, or what they do when they're not being paid, what their passion is, what they, you know, where they like to travel, where they like to have days out, what pets they've got, who they connect with. They just give their job. And that is, what do you do? But the question, what do you do, isn't what do you work as? It's what do you do? Well, and so maybe this viewer could start by answering that question. What do you do? And if they struggle, then that's a place for opportunity, isn't it? To try and think about what would they do? What does bring them joy? When was the last time they really laughed or felt really good? And what were they doing? Because actually, this is an amazing opportunity to create a life, maybe a job that incorporates what they do rather than, just a job. And
no, absolutely. With relationships, I know it's really tough when relationships fail. I went through the same thing during the first lockdown. I've been with someone for several years, and just completely out of the blue, she decided she didn't want to be in a relationship anymore. It completely knocked me for six, and it was a really hard place to be. I think it's important for me to share this because often as therapists or as professionals or experts in our field, people expect that you never experience the challenge, which would be like saying to a doctor, I bet you never get ill, or saying to a mechanic, I bet your car never breaks down. Of course the doctor gets ill, of course the mechanic gets the car breaks down. I might be known as a stress management expert. I'd never call myself such, but other people sometimes do. That doesn't mean I'm immune. It means that when it happens, I can recognize it and know what to do about it. And when I went through that, it knocked me sideways. But again, having the chance to reflect, I know that if I take on board the value of that experience and I take the time to reflect and learn and grow from that, my next relationship will be better as a result. If I don't, I just end up in these kind of ever diminishing circles, and I just keep repeating the same patterns of behavior. So this is where there's an opportunity to look at, well, what happened? To be able to put on an investigative journalist hat on yourself as you start to explore your own life and what worked and what didn't, and do a little panorama program on yourself. All the different characters and all the different plot lines and what happened and what worked and what didn't, and really be able to reflect on that in a more objective way and think about, how do I learn? How do I grow from this? How do I ensure my life is better and richer as a result of having this experience?
Yeah, and also when doing that, making sure that everything is what you do want, not what you don't want. I've spoken to a lot of people who have moved on from relationships during this past year, and sometimes we've talked about, what would you like in a different partner? And it's very often, well, I don't want someone who's like this, or I don't want someone who's like that. But what do you want? And we actually often don't know what we want. We know what we don't want, but we don't always know what we do want. And so getting out a pen and paper, I'm a real believer in writing things down. But getting out a pen and paper and writing down what you do want.
There's an interesting point, and I think there's something a little bit broader we can explore here. Don't think of a red lorry. Don't think of a red lorry. Juliet, don't think of a red lorry. What are you thinking about?
Well, I know I need to say a red lorry, but I also know the trick, so I deliberately call the yellow lorry. But I know where you're going.
So the vast majority of you that are watching today, when I ask you not to think of a red lorry, you automatically thought of a red lorry. What is the reason for that? So let's just talk about language and the way that we process language. So that's one of my areas of expertise, is kind of, how we use language. And the language you use to yourself is the most powerful. How your brain processes that statement is red lorry, don't think, right? You cannot process a negative. So what you do, you process the positive and then negate it, right? This is how the brain processes language. Yeah. So when you find yourself in a situation where you are being told not to do something, how your brain processes that is you think about doing it first before you negate that. So if you're saying, I don't want this, what you're saying is, I want someone that's going to be, let's say, I don't want someone that's going to be dishonest. So how your brain is processing that, I want someone that is going to be dishonest, not, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Focus as a positive. So this is why when someone has come out of a relationship where they have been cheated on or someone's been unfaithful, and you template yourself with that belief that I don't want someone that's going to be unfaithful, and you harbor that thought, you are basically processing that as the positive and then negating it. So part of you is always looking for reasons or suspicious this person could be behaving in a particular way that could lead them to being unfaithful. Now, when you're projecting that out, it's like telling a kid, don't be stupid, don't be stupid. They're basically saying, they're deciphering that as be stupid, don't, right? And after all, they start believing it. The kid starts believing it and they start acting stupid. Or like I was told at a young age, there are certain things that I'm not very good at. My PE teacher, I found my report cards in my mum's attic years ago, and very much, several years in a row, the PE teacher was like, Neil has a lot of skills in life, but, sport or athletics is not one of them. And it was very much like, don't do athletics, pretty much, right? It wasn't the exact phraseology, but it was very much, a negative message, which I believed. I got into my 20s and I believed that I couldn't run, I couldn't play sport, that it's just not one of my skills, because people had told me that, and I bought into that. It was only when I started to explore language and NLP and communication, particularly self-communication, our language with ourselves, I realized I've been telling myself a story based on other people's input, which I'd started to believe. When I understood that and I reprogrammed that, I've been on to run 5 marathons, I've done like 20 triathlons, I've done an Ironman. And this was nothing to do with my physical strength or what I'm capable of in my body. It was to do with changing my mind and believing and reprogramming what was going on up here. The point I'm making right now is there is a lot of messages that we are constantly being templated with, and also a lot of messages we're giving ourselves about what we should not be doing, or a lot of negative messages which are being processed in the positive, which we are then negating, but are still leaving the negative impact. So how do we change that? Well, you take control of what you're telling yourself. It's your voice. You get to decide what it says.
Yeah.
So always put the statement in the positive. So exactly as you said, if there are certain things you don't want, well, frame that in the what do you want?
Yeah, very much so. But with everything, relationships, job, home, home. So many things, everything, the whole life.
And not just at an individual level. I think this is where we've got an opportunity at a macro, a societal level as well, to start be thinking about what do we want? Because yes, we're all very comfortable and very well equipped to complain about the things we don't want, particularly in Britain. We always complain about the weather. We don't want any more rain. It's like, oh great, what do you want? I'm not saying that if we all sat together and held hands and say we want sunshine, that would change the weather. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, some people would say it would, but
But there are things that we can influence by starting to think about, well, what do we want? And how are we going to achieve that? Because, there is a lot of people that are talking about what they don't want anymore. And that's not necessarily bringing us the positive change we need.
No, it's true. And it's interesting as well, actually, because with this, the COVID, we've spoken before about the divide that it's creating.
Absolutely.
And between friends. And there's a lot of criticism of other people's beliefs, and then that's the don't want again, because no one wants to be in lockdown. So I think there's very few people, champagne lockdowners, like we've spoken about for, probably quite happy, but actually not that happy, because they might have all the money, they might be stuck at home, but they can't have a holiday. So there's very few people who really want to be in lockdown. They might want to keep the ability to just kind of stay at home a bit more, but have the other bits on the side. So when I think that can help bringing people together as well, instead of saying, thinking about your friend, I don't want you to say that, or I don't want you to think that. Well, what do you want then? What do you want from that friend? Because you might not like their belief about something, or their view, the opinion that they've shared. What do you want? Because you might be able to achieve that together.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So I think we've got time for one more question. It's quite a big question, so I will share it and see what your thoughts are. Good evening, all. I have had a recent diagnosis of complex PTSD. After childhood sexual abuse, I'm currently going to weekly therapy session with a therapist that I'm very comfortable with, which is great, but I feel quite overwhelmed with the diagnosis. I don't think my abuse was bad enough to cause me to get something like this. This is the second large flare-up I've had of the symptoms, and it's very exhausting. What's the main points I need to consider to be able to manage this? Is there anything I can do on a daily basis to try and ease the symptoms? As I'm now trying to break my current cycle of masking, running away from how I think or feel, or drinking as a distraction. Thank you for your time. So obviously, it's a clinical diagnosis. It sounds like they've got therapeutic support, which is fantastic. But Yeah, I think, you know, when you're going through quite a significant trauma, there is that natural reaction to want to run away from it, or to mask it, or distract, or desensitize yourself to it by turning to external stimulus or substances. What's your thoughts on this? If this was someone that was coming to see you in a therapeutic setting, how would you support this individual?
Well, the first thing I want to pick up on is that them saying that they didn't think what happened to them was bad enough to cause this. And I feel like that happens a lot. If you were to write down the experience on paper and give it to a group of people to read, all of those people would probably say, this is not okay. But we're resilient, aren't we? We're resilient creatures. And so when we're in these situations, kind of get through it, it happens. And then we look back and think, well, it wasn't that bad. Why have I got a problem with this? Because it wasn't that bad. Or with a lot of things, there's other parts of it. Guilt, you know, it must have been my fault. I must have caused it. So I really think that's a key to this, accepting that it possibly was. Well, it was bad. It was bad enough to cause trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD. It doesn't matter whether it was bad enough. None of that matters. What matters is this is the result. I think it's really good this person's in therapy, and I'm guessing they're at some point in their therapy.
Sounds like
and undergoing that. So I think it would be really useful for them to bring this to their therapist's attention, that they're overwhelmed with the feelings. I'm guessing the therapist is helping with the things they're using, but there are other ways to you know, to bring that solace that probably is coming from the alcohol. Did it say?
Yeah, it's masking, running away from how I think or feel, or drinking. So it definitely feels like, you know, trying to escape from it rather than face it, which I know can be traumatic.
Yeah. Meditation, mindfulness, what I mentioned before, yoga.
Now, there's something really interesting here, something very common. This particular letter is a very British reaction, which is like, oh, yeah, what I experienced, it couldn't be that bad. Also, another very British reaction is, well, I don't know, I don't need therapy, I don't need to see a counsellor. Which is why even when people literally are really compromised, they still won't reach out. Number one, because they don't want to admit that there's a problem, but also, well, if I do, maybe I'm depriving or denying someone else that needs it more than I do. We noticed with the hospital admissions and people seeking out medical treatment over the last year, it's dropped off significantly. A lot of hospitals are empty for anything other than the things that we're told to go to hospital for.
Yeah.
People think, well, I shouldn't turn up because people need it more than I do. This is, as I said, it is quite British, because I lived in America for a while. And do you know what? It's totally different there. People push past each other to get to the front of the queue. It's like, I need help. And, you know, what I'm experiencing is really bad. And, you know, I need treatment and I need therapy. It's a very different approach. It's a very different mentality to what we experience here in Britain, where...
Can I, also just say that we're being told this by the government: sacrifice yourself to save the NHS.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think this is where it's really concerning, that you know, it's not just this individual. I've experienced this a lot, not just in recent times, even before before COVID hit, where a lot of people just, no, it's fine, it's fine. It's like, no, that's not fine. It would be like someone walking into a room and you're literally, your legs hanging on by a thread, and you're like, no, it's fine, it's no big deal. It's like, dude, your leg's about to fall off. Yeah. You need treatment. Then from a mental and emotional perspective, there are times I come across people with serious traumas and they're trying to cover over it and gloss over it, and it's absolutely fine. I'm like, no, you need treatment. There are literally times I've had to send people off immediately to seek out medical or psychological intervention, because they are compromised.
We really, really struggle in this country with I don't want to say illness, because I think that's the wrong word, but something that isn't visible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Struggles that are visible. We really...
We are a nation that's not comfortable or have never really got comfortable with the idea of therapy, of talking about things, of opening up, is that British stiff upper lip, pull your socks up and get on with it, soldier on, grown men don't cry. A lot of these phrases that are ingrained in our psyche, many of these are hangovers from the Second World War, by the way. A lot of people don't know that. Soldier on literally came from the Second World War, where we had a defined threat and we needed to get through life. That's not the world we live in anymore. People that soldier on and pull their socks up and get on with it are the ones that are going to keel over first. It's you kind of need to be present to the fact that there are things that are affecting us on a daily basis that need time and support to heal. And I think this is where there's obviously the key things like therapeutic interventions, and it sounds like our listener, our viewer, has very much already sought that out, which is great. But it's also what I would describe as the functional medicine. It's very much the things that you were talking about, the self-care, the daily routines, the time to walk, the time to reflect, white space. We tend to fill our lives with stuff. We never have the time to sit and be present. It was like we were talking about with the previous the question. It was about making the time to figure out who you are. If you're constantly distracted by your devices, by television, by work, by relationships, by life, when do you ever get the time to spend with yourself? It's
the social media generation, isn't it? I was even speaking to someone the other day, and we've all been there, who watches TV whilst scrolling through the phone.
Absolutely.
And there is, even if you have time, you don't, because you pick up your phone to scroll. There's so little just time to be without distraction.
And this is fascinating because, if you talk to particularly younger generations about self-care, yoga, meditation, all the things you've said, the automatic response, there's an app for that. Like, Headspace is now the biggest meditation app on the planet. If you look at mindfulness as a practice, it's being present in the moment with no judgment. The very fact that you're using an app on your phone is not mindful. The fact that you're listening to someone telling you what to do is the antithesis of mindfulness. Like, forgive me for being blunt, and we have partnered with Headspace before, but I'm just going to have to, call it by its name. That app is not mindful.
No, I'm so with you.
From the reality of this moment. If you need an app to be present to you, you are not being present to you.
This could be a whole other series, Neil. Like, at the moment, we're focusing on mental health as a result of lockdown, but there is a whole another series of mental health clinics based on the problems as a result of devices. But yeah, what is being mindful?
Getting people to consume more by giving you an app for yoga, giving you an app for meditation, giving you an app for walking. It's like, no, you don't need an app for that. You just need to put your shoes on or even go barefoot and just walk. If you wanna understand mindfulness, it's quite literally being present to the reality of this moment as it is. Using your senses to observe what is happening right here, right now. You don't need to do anything. You just need to observe what is happening. Whatever ways that you want to, whether that's just your breath or you just sit there and look out the window and just do nothing. Literally, it's the art of doing nothing.
And observe it yourself rather than checking your app to check how well you've slept or how low your heart rate is or how many steps you've done. How do you feel?
Absolutely.
How do you feel right now?
And this is, again, for the viewer that came with this question, you said, what are the main points in managing this? Is having time to be present to you. And there are times that moment will be uncomfortable, where challenging, tough thoughts may come up. Be present to that. Don't react to it. Observe it. Put yourself in what I would describe as observer status. You are just watching yourself as a passive bystander. It's like you step out of yourself and you watch yourself for 10, 15 minutes at a time. There are times it will be really pleasurable. I have had, no word of a lie, just through practicing this for many years of my life, and I've had a couple of experiences where I did what's known as Vipassana. It's like a 10-day silent meditation retreat where you're literally spending 10 days in complete silence, no engagement, no phone, no technology, no talking, just 10 days of just observing yourself. Nothing else, just watching your breath. I got to the point where I was having proper, full-on, trippy psychedelic experiences. Nothing ingested, no external substances. I wasn't, off doing any what are known as plant medicines. It was just by connecting with myself at a very deep level. So the point is that you can trick yourself into these really blissful altered states. I'm talking full on colors, lights, visual, sound, everything, right?
Yeah.
I genuinely thought someone had slipped something into the tea, but it was just because I'd taken my body into an altered state of consciousness. So you can have incredibly intense, pleasurable experiences, but you can also face some of your deepest, darkest traumas only by creating the space to get yourself into that altered state of consciousness.
And reconnecting the mind and body. I mean, disassociation is a massive part of PTSD, isn't it? And yeah, reconnecting that mind and body.
Absolutely. And the best way to do that is by being present to the reality of this moment as it is. So whether that is by you take your daily walk, you leave your phone at home and just be present to the birds tweeting and the wind on your face or the snow or whatever crazy weather we've got going on at the moment, whether it's just find that comfortable seat and sitting, looking out the window and just daydreaming, white space, create pockets of white space in your daily routine, time to do nothing and for your mind just to wander to wherever it needs to go. And if you need an anchor, the most powerful anchor is your breath. It's the first thing you do when you arrive on this planet, the last thing you do before you leave this planet, and it's something that's happening in any given moment in your life. But 99% of us never pay attention to our breath. It's just something that happens in the background. When you bring yourself back to that, you're anchoring yourself to something that is real and is happening now. It's not happening in the future, it's not happening in the past. You're watching your breath now. So that would be some really good things to start with. And obviously using that opportunity of being present to support the work that you're doing with your therapist, I think would be for me the key sort of advice that I would give here. Amazing. All right, we covered a lot of ground. Good session today. So Julia, we've obviously now got to the point the weekend's coming. People will be off in the beer gardens and out to the gyms and getting their hair and their nails done. And yeah, I think I just want to leave all of our lovely viewers and listeners with the final thoughts of what advice would you give people for the week ahead, just to ensure that we're navigating this time where we can very easily get wrapped up into the external, what we can do, and bury the how we're feeling, and not really ever address that.
Yeah, actually, it's sorry, I had some final thoughts that I kind of wanted to share, which are less related to what you just said, but I think still relevant. Of course, we want everyone to go and have fun. I mean, this is what we're wanting, everyone to be out having fun and doing what they want to do. And so I don't want to be like a big bore, but I think something that's so important is nutrition. And actually, I was speaking via message with a nutritional therapist that I know well this morning, and she's working with a lot of people who have what they're calling long COVID, and she's using nutrition to heal this or help this, and she's had some observations, but that's kind of irrelevant. I think what's really relevant is nutrition is important as a preventative, not just a cure. And we are going to be going out back to the pubs, back to socializing, and I think there's been different types of people. There's been some people who have eaten really badly in lockdown because it's all they've used it as a comfort, and there's other people who have actually been much healthier because they're used to going out all of the time and eating more unhealthily. And I think that's something to be really aware of, how important our nutrition, particularly for those people who are fearful of COVID, because nutrition is so important for the immune system and it's important for mental health, massively important for both. And so when you're out there at the pub, wherever, just keeping that in mind as well, that nutrition is really important.
Well, that nicely gives me a segue to my closing point, which is, in the same vein, happiness is important for your immune system and your mental health. Actually, as the phrase goes, laughter is the best medicine. When you are happy and you are enjoying yourself and you're having a laugh, actually your immune system is boosted, and your mental health and well-being is also boosted. So you have to remember, we are holistic beings. Your mental state affects your emotional state, affects your physical state. When one improves, that impacts the others. So this is really a great opportunity to really fill our boots and have a laugh and enjoy ourselves, because that in itself will be another great thing we can do to protect our health and well-being, to improve our immune system, to leave us more resilient in the face of any potential future challenges. but also improves the quality of our life as well. So I think this is some really good points for us to finish on. Is okay, we're all going to go out and have a laugh, and the people that enjoy a drink will probably have a few drinks this weekend. But balance that up. You know, if you're going out, maybe walk to the pub. You know, maybe have some time out in fresh air. Maybe, you know, do some things like you know, kick a ball about in the park with your friends, or with the children, or something to get yourself active and moving, and bring that smile to your face as well.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. It's always a pleasure, Juliet. So looking forward to next week.
Yeah.
In the meantime, please do get your questions in by Monday afternoon at 5 o'clock at timetorecovery.org, so info@timetorecovery.org. We will do our best to answer as many of those as possible. But in the meantime, have a wonderful week, and we'll see you all this time next week.
Bye.